Joining me now is Elie Mystal. He's the justice correspondent for The Nation. He's also the author of the best-selling, New York Times best-selling book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. That's right. We got to give you all your flowers, Elie. Listen, when all this was going down the past couple of weeks, you know, you were the only person I wanted to talk to about this and get your take. I'm really a little confused by the multiple lenses here. So on the appeal, the DOJ is no longer fighting the special master, and they're only asking for a small stay for part of the order. What do you think the DOJ's play is here? What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, they're realizing that the 11th Circuit is also infected with Trump judges, right? Aileen Cannon, the district judge who's making these horrible, biased, corrupt decisions, she was appointed by Trump, confirmed 9 days after he lost the election. The 11th Circuit, 6 judges out of the 11 are appointed. Sorry. I got that confused. 6 judges on the 11th Circuit are Trump judges, so that's a huge problem. They know when they go up to the Supreme Court, a third of the Supreme Court was appointed by Donald Trump. Every one of the 234 or so judges that Trump appointed is suspect, right? Like, we have to start understanding that these are 234 landmines that Trump left behind in order to potentially blow up our democracy down the road, and these people serve for life. I have said on this program, on many programs, that one of the key reasons Trump is not already in jail is that he keeps finding people who are willing to lie, cheat, and debase themselves for him. And Aileen Cannon is just the latest person who is willing to debase herself, her profession, and her office in service of Donald Trump. So he found another one. And he might find some more on the 11th Circuit, and he might find some more on the Supreme Court. So the DOJ is trying to navigate that reality. And all I'm trying to say is to get people to understand that reality. That's not new. People who now say, oh, maybe the 11th Circuit will be more reasonable. Again, you can't count on that. You have to treat every single Trump appointee as suspect until proven otherwise.
I mean, the courts have always been such a big deal for the Republican Party, right? During Trump's tenure, he appointed over 200 judges, a majority white male judges. Some had never been judges before and really had very flimsy resumes to take up these positions. But it's not just the courts that are threatened here, Elie. You know, this is something that is very concerning to me because Trump, and I will caution our viewers, I do not enjoy playing Trump sound. I do not enjoy giving him attention and centering him because that's exactly what he wants. But this threat to the country, I do think it's important to play and talk about. He's threatening the country, Elie. Take a listen to what he said just this week, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
I think if it happened, I think you'd have problems in this country, the likes of which perhaps we've never seen before. I don't think the people of the United States would stand for it.
What kind of problems, Mr. President?
I think they'd have big problems. Big problems. I just don't think they'd stand for it. They will not sit still and stand for this ultimate of hoaxes.
I mean, this sounds a lot like stand back and stand by. He's not acting like he's under investigation. He has a rally planned in Ohio tonight. This kind of thing is quite scary, Elie, and I just want to be petty again and say, you know what? We tried to tell you. So now here we are facing this man who keeps trying to rally the troops and give a wink and a nod to the Tiki Torch marchers to essentially create havoc, not just in the court system, but also in these streets. Your take?
Let's start here, okay? Like, let's start with the problem with the Fourth Estate, the American media. Listen to that clip again, right? That Hugh Hewitt made himself sound like Billy Bush in that clip, right?
Yeah.
What kind of problems, Mr. President?
Right.
Like, he's threatening to unleash domestic terrorism on the country if he is held accountable for crime, and you, a media person, is sitting there saying, what kind of problems might we have? What is that? What is that? At some point, the Fourth Estate is going to have to realize its complicity in allowing these white domestic terrorists to organize and attain some level of legitimacy as they threaten our democracy. So I want to cable that because that's a huge part of the problem. The cause of the problem, of course, is Trump himself and his MAGA acolytes themselves and the people who are willing to do the violence in Trump's name. Again, I'm not I guess I want to say that I'm not surprised that he's threatening this because A, he's literally done it before. And B, this is literally what conservative white folks do when they don't get their way. They turn violent. As a black man in this country, as a person who is aware of the black history in the New World, white people turn violent when they don't politically get their way all the damn time in this country. It's what they do. And so from the perspective of a black person, I'm kind of like, welcome to the world that I've been living in, America, because now what we have is white domestic terrorists threatening to turn violence against non-black people, against everybody else, if the white supremacist ideology doesn't win the day and their white supremacist king is held accountable for crime.
And I want to point out, Ellie,
normal.
You're right, and you're not opining. I mean, that statement is rooted in history and facts. If you are even a modest student of history, you have seen this scenario play out several times, which is why we punctuated the point we are trying to tell you. And I just want to echo your point about the media sanitizing these folks, because the people who abandoned him on January 6th, he was just as bad on January 5th. And so to be given a platform to sanitize yourself after aligning with this foolishness is disgusting to see as a member of the press. I want to shift gears because you wrote a wonderful piece in The Nation. You're always so insightful and thoughtful in your writing. As much as you all enjoy Ellie on television, his writing is just quite taking and insightful. You wrote about these governors shipping migrants to different countries. We saw just this morning that a group of migrants were dropped off in front of Vice President Kamala Harris's residence. We have seen migrants get dropped off in Martha's Vineyard, or on Martha's Vineyard, I should say. We're seeing Republican Florida man Ron DeSantis do this. We're seeing in Texas Republican Greg Abbott do this. This sounds like it could be breaking the law. I mean, is this human trafficking? Is this kidnapping? Is this legal?
First of all, I want to say there is nothing wrong with us as a nation trying to come up with the best place to handle influxes of immigrants and new Americans. That is good. We should have a national immigration plan. You know who stops us from having a national immigration plan? Republicans. Republicans are the ones who force us to do this in a state-by-state way. And now particular Republicans, particularly fascist Republicans, are trying to ship migrants around the country to make them suffer and try to expose for a MAGA lark and troll the libs. What I believe is happening here is kidnapping. It's not quite true to Hoyle human trafficking, just because the way our laws are written are kind of specific in terms of trafficking for the purposes of sex or labor. Trafficking for the purposes of having a laugh at liberals is not a human trafficking violation as I read the law. However, kidnapping is a thing. Kidnapping by trick is a thing. Telling people that you were going to take them one place and sending them someplace else is a form of kidnapping. And I can prove that to you if I do the Matthew McConaughey thing. Now imagine they were white. Imagine Ron DeSantis goes up to a group of white teenagers, offers them some candy, and says, hey, I'm going to take you to Disney World if you get in my van. And then Ron DeSantis drives them to Busch Garden. That's kidnapping. You're not allowed to do that. And so the people who did that, the organizers who did that, and perhaps even the governor, they should be charged with kidnapping. The other horrible part of this story is that we're hearing now from the immigration attorneys who descended upon Martha's Vineyard. And oh, by the way, MAGA fascists, like doing a political stunt within shouting distance of some of the hardest hitting lawyers in the country, maybe not your best tactical choice. But anyway, some of the immigration lawyers on Martha's Vineyard have said that these people were processed by DHS and told DHS that they didn't have addresses. And DHS made up fake addresses for them so that they would be too far away from those addresses to go to future hearings. That's an allegation. I don't know if that's true. That's what the immigration attorneys were saying. If that's true, the DHS agents involved need to be investigated, fired, and prosecuted for abuse of power. So this is potentially a much bigger scandal, and we need investigation and accountability for it.